reset it.
Okay, video, all right, and I'm just going to start recording.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, great. And all these contraptions are almost ready.
Key word here is trap.
Exactly. Okay, good evening, everybody. Great to see you. And wishing everybody a kasiva v'chasima tov, a good healthy year, nachas yor, lanu u'lechol Yisrael. We're going to talk tonight about the journey from Rosh Hashana through Yom Kippur, which will have a little bit of discussion about Elul, which is pre-Rosh Hashana, then Rosh Hashana, Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and Yom Kippur. It's a journey that we take each and every year, and I think it's very important that we reflect upon the big picture as well as each step along the way. Now, there's a Gemara in Maseches Yoma, and the Gemara is the Gemara is in Maseches Rosh Hashana, and it's on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, and it says as follows: that Rabbi Elazar says that a person should always be misader, la'olam yastir adam tefilaso, v'achar kach yispalo. A person should always arrange his davening beforehand, and then he should daven after that. So yasdir is to make a seder, arrange it. So what does this mean? First of all, the Gemara says this is really necessary mostly on Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur because the davening, the Shemona Esrei, is not so familiar to people. It's a completely unique Shemona Esrei in the middle brachos. So the brachos that we say during the year are quite familiar to us, but these brachos are not as familiar to us. So we have to therefore be misader them. Think about what they mean before we actually daven. Now I'd like to take that concept and in addition to applying it to the tefillos of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, to also apply it to this time of year. So if we think about it, we have so much going on. The month of Elul, we emphasize Tshuva. Rosh Hashanah is the Yom Hadin, the Yom HaZikaron, the Day of Judgment. Aseres Yemei Tshuva, we're working on ourselves to do Tshuva. Then Yom Kippur, a day of forgiveness for Klal Yisrael. And even though most definitely Sukkot is part of this continuum, but for tonight's discussion, we're going to go through Yom Kippur. I always like to say that in Yiddishkeit, Avodas Hashem in general is a process. And it's Pasiyah Achar Pasiyah. It's one step after another. And we just got to take this process one step at a time. And at the same time, we have to realize that each step in the process is essential for the big picture and the whole journey. Now, the month of Elul, for example, when we're focusing on our tshuva, there's a very fascinating thing in the Bnei Yissaschar where he says as follows. It says, the milchama of Sichon and Og, when Moshe Rabbeinu fought Sichon Melech HaEmori and Og Melech HaBashan, two powerful kings, at the very end of our 40-year sojourn in the Midbar. When did that battle occur? When Moshe fought them and defeated these giant kings. The Bnei Yissaschar says, our Mesorah says, this battle occurred in the month of Elul. The battle against Sichon and Og occurred in the month of Elul. Now, what's the significance of that? And he goes on to explain. We know the concept of a mezuzah. A mezuzah we have at the opening to our home and each room. It's a mitzvah to hang up a mezuzah min haTorah. One of the things that a mezuzah accomplishes is shemira. It protects the house, and not only physically, but also spiritually. The presence of the mezuzah on that door of our house wards off bad forces, negative forces, spiritually negative forces. The mezuzah there wards them off. The Shem Shakai, Shin Dalet Yud, which is on the outside of the mezuzah, some have the Rosh Tevos, Shomer Delasos Yisroel. He guards the doorways of Israel. Shin Dalet Yud. Now, Bnei Yissaschar says, when we were about to enter Eretz Yisroel, at that point, the land was inhabited by very wicked people, the 7 nations of Canaan. And who stood at the entry to Eretz Yisroel? Sichon and Og. So it's the opposite of a mezuzah. It's a mezuzah in the bad way. That Sichon and Og were there at the entrance to the land of Israel, keeping out anything holy. The reverse. And therefore you couldn't get any Kedusha into Klal Yisrael, into Eretz Yisrael, because those 2 powerful kings who were very wicked and enemies of the Jewish people, they were stationed at the doorway to the land of Israel. So Moshe Rabbeinu defeats them, and when he defeats them, the door to Eretz Yisrael is now open, and the, shall we say, the bad mezuzah is now off the door, and Moshe Rabbeinu's victory presents a new mezuzah into the land of Israel. I think I mentioned to you before, in the name of Rabbi Dov Weissmandel, the Nitro Rav, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who was very active in saving Jews from the Holocaust. He said, the Orgadayahu brings him down, that when we wrote the Torah in 70 languages on stones, entering the land of Eretz Yisrael, last week's parsha, he said that that's the mezuzah of the land of Israel. So a house has to have 2 paragraphs, Shema v'hoyim shemoa. The land of Israel, it's a big house, you need the whole Torah. And translated into 70 languages. So you have this concept of entering the land of Israel. There's a mezuzah there, you go into Kedusha. And the Bnei Yissaschar says, because this occurred in the month of Elul, so it's also applicable to the new year. That Elul is the doorway to the new year. It's the mezuzah of the upcoming Jewish year. So everything that we do in the month of Elul is preparing the way to enter the year through the mezuzah that we place on our door, on our Elul door, going into this time of year. So one way to look at what we're doing now in the month of Elul, and we have 1 week left, is we're establishing our doorway to the new year, to Rosh Hashana. I think whenever you can come away with a concept about how to approach something in Yiddishkeit, in Avodas Hashem, it's extremely helpful. That's what I find. So I'm trying to think about Elul this year in this way. This is my doorway to Rosh Hashanah. This is my doorway to the new year. And trying, therefore, to bring Kedusha in to the new year. Now, what about Rosh Hashanah itself? Now, on Rosh Hashanah, there is a pasuk that we say, part of our tefillos, a verse of our tefillos. It says that all the Jewish people pass before Hashem kivnei moron, like sheep in a flock. So the sheep pass by the shepherd, and he looks at each one as they go by. Every single one of us, we're walking by Hashem's gaze. He's looking at us, kivnei moron. Of course, the miraculous thing is that Hashem sees us one by one, but he also does that instantaneously. Biskira achas. Only God can do that. So, there's a sefer called the Lev Eliyahu by Rabbi Eliyahu Lopian, and he says the following idea. He says people get in line because they want to go somewhere. So, for example, you're at a train station or you're at an airport. you want to buy a ticket in order to get on the train. And the way that works is first come, first serve. So if you get in line first, you get a good seat on the train. If you get in line last, you get on the train, but you're in the back. So he says similarly, there are many places to get on the train this time of year. Some people, Rosh Chodesh Elul, Rosh Chodesh benching Elul, almost a month ago, they hear we're benching Rosh Chodesh, it's Elul, they get in line right away. Or they hear the shofar in shul in the morning, and they get in line at the very beginning of the month of Elul. Sephardic Jews start saying slichos in the month of Elul, very early in the morning. Ashkenazic Jews, the last week of Elul. We got off easy in this one. So some people wake up and they get in line right away. Other people, in his lashon, the Levi Eliyahu, Rosh Hashana comes, they're still sleeping. They didn't get in line yet. So Kivnei Maron is that everybody has to line up. And the sooner we get in line for what's happening on Rosh Hashanah, on Sersei Tshuva, and Yom Kippur, the better off we are. And so to speak, you get a better seat because you got in line sooner. Now what that means to me is this, that the process of teshuvah requires reflection, attention, careful thought. If I jump in at the very end, I've missed a big part of the process. That's the idea of getting in the back of the train. I'm still in, but there's a lot of ground I have to cover because those first 30 days of Elul, 29 days of Elul, didn't do anything. So that's Kivnei Maron. There is a sefer. Well, before I do that, I just want to tell you a quick personal story about the Sephardim who start saying Slichos Rosh Chodesh Elul. So when do we say Slichos? In general, quite early in the morning. It's dark out, and just before Shacharis, we start here about 6 o'clock or a little earlier. So when I was a yeshiva bacher, one year I was in a courtyard. I rented a room in a courtyard with a few other guys in the neighborhood called a Bukharian neighborhood, which now is a booming Haredi neighborhood in Yerushalayim. At that time, it was still a kind of a quiet neighborhood, mostly Sephardic Jews. So I spent my first night in the room in the courtyard and went to sleep. And I don't know, it was about 4:30 in the morning. And I was hearing like, what's going on here? Like, what is happening here? And I just kind of fell back to sleep. And woke up the next morning. I think I probably forgot about it. The next night, I went to sleep about 4:30 in the morning. Like, what's going on? So I got out of bed. For yeshiva bacher to get out of bed at 4:30 in the morning, that's already a nace. But I had to. And I said, what's going on here? So I go outside, and I'm hearing like davening. And I look up the stairway, and on the second level of the courtyard is a shul. And it was a Bukharian shul. And they were saying slichos at 4:30 in the morning. I'm an Ashkenazic yeshiva bacher. It doesn't happen for another 3 weeks. So I didn't know what was happening, and then I realized that that's what was happening, that they were saying slichos from Rosh Chodesh Elul, which is when I arrived to go to yeshiva, and that was my lesson. I didn't learn that Sephardim say slichos early from the Shulchan Aruch. I learned it from that. So that's a little story that happened to me in the late 1970s. The sefer is Ma'orei Nayim, from Rabbi Nachum of Chernobyl, the first Chernobyl Rebbe. He was my Rebbe's 8th generation grandfather. So he says the following thing. I'm going to read it out for you. And this is in Parshas Ha'azinu. Rosh Hashanah. He says, it is known that there are many forms of a koma shlema. A koma shlema means a human form. But a human form has different versions of that form. What does he mean by that? There's a version in time, there's a version in the person like we are, and a version in space. So what is the version of the human form, a koma shlema, which takes place in time? So he says as follows: Rosh Hashana is the head, just like it sounds, Rosh Hashana, the head. Pesach and Sukkot are the two arms. Pesach is the right arm, and Sukkot is the left arm. Shavuos is the body, the torso. Hanukkah and Purim are the two legs. So with those Yom Tovim, you have a human being. The head, the arms, the torso, the legs. What do you think the neshama is? Say it again? No, which day? What did you say, Sean? Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the neshama. So you have these holidays with Yom Tovim. They represent the human body, and the soul of the human body in the dimension of time is Yom Kippur. That's what the Moreh Naim says. Now, what's the significance of Rosh Hashanah being the head, being the Rosh? This is how I understand it. The year starts with our understanding of it, our intellectual appreciation of what the new year is, and the thoughts that a person has in general, and the motivations that we have. Everything else follows them. So if I go into a situation with a very strong idea about it in my mind, my emotions and my actions will follow. The idea of Rosh Hashanah is to develop an appreciation, a mental appreciation of what this time of year is. So the head, the Rosh, which is the beginning of the person in time, starts off in the right way, with the right ideas, the Rosh. Going into the year like that, we would then hope that the rest of the year follows suit. So what are we trying to accomplish on Rosh Hashanah? And this idea comes from the Sefer, the Alei Shor, by Rav Shlomo Valba. And Rav Valba says that we're trying to make ourselves into a kli, into a receptacle, a vessel, to receive Hashem's presence. So that's another idea to hold on to. If we're looking at Elul as the doorway in, what do we want to accomplish on Rosh Hashanah? How do we see ourselves? What's our mind telling us about this time of year? That we must make ourselves into a kli to hold on to Hashem's presence. And to start the year with that drive and that motivation, this is what we would like to do with the coming year, to make ourselves that kli. I'll stop there for a minute. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yeah, Shoshana, please.
Everything you have said to me has been connected to some of the things I've been learning already.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Good.
I listened to Rick Siegel, Dr. Rosh, she's doing my share, and she was talking about preparing an Elul, what's the purpose? And she says, like, we always tend to see, like, to build a picture in our minds about where we're going. We always go into things I'm doing right, doing wrong, and the things I need to correct. But if we see it in the context
right.
of what we can be, what we can do, it takes it in a whole new awareness.
Yeah, it does.
So I just wanted to share that piece.
Thank you.
Connection.
Thank you very much. Any questions out there? Any other question on anything we've said? Okay. Rabbi, please.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
Getting this right.
Yeah.
The idea says to me that we're looking at the whole year coming as many varied opportunities to be with Hashem as represented by those parts of the body that you said, Pesach, Sukkot, whatever they are. And so we're starting here with an awareness that all these things are coming, and we want to make sure that we are in the right position to derive the benefit, or, you know, to just experience these things.
Right.
Is that?
Right. So we are visualizing ourselves being in the right way, in the right place, in the right frame of mind to experience this year correctly, as best we can. And that's the frame of mind that we go into Rosh Hashanah with.
So that how we're going to experience, you know, Purim when it comes way later is we're
starting now.
starting to determine how that's going to
That's right.
happen.
That's right. The way, the Rebbe is saying, the way that we will experience Purim 6 months from now, it's starting now. Because we have to go into the year within a certain frame of mind to hopefully establish the momentum and the mentality of that year. And this is where it starts. That's also the idea of the simanim that we eat at the table on Rosh Hashanah night. What's the idea of making a siman? We eat certain foods, the apple and the honey, and other simanim that we make. The idea is that this is how the year starts. So we're taking food, which is one of the most basic human functions, eating, and we're attaching it to some kind of a bracha. We should overcome our enemies. Our gazardin should be torn up. We should have a good sweet year. What's that about? It's establishing the track for the year. That when we involve ourselves in the physical world eating, we're doing so in such a way which is brachadik. And that helps us. That's one of the ideas of this simanim. Anybody else? Yeah, Lev Avram, please.
I remember when I used to go to Eitz Chaim in Yom Tovim, Rabbi Seinfeld, Alexander Seinfeld, always used to give a shiur. And he would describe it this time, at Rosh Hashanah, he would say, it's like you built a rocket ship, and you're on the launch pad, and you have a certain destination that you want to reach. So you have to make sure that that rocket is perfectly in alignment with your destination. Right. And you take off on Rosh Hashanah. But if you start to deviate from your path, even a few degrees, you're going to miss your target.
Miss the target.
You're going to be way off by the time you get to where you're going.
Right. Now, I would like to say, based on Lev Avram's comment here, that it's like taking off on a rocket ship and you have to keep your course, because if you're off at the beginning, you're going to be way off at the end. But very fascinating for us as Jews, we do have the opportunity to reroute and get ourselves on track. What's that called? Tshuva, right? So what comes right after Rosh Hashanah? Actually, Rosh Hashanah is a part of it. Aseret Yemei Tshuva. So we know, as Jewish people, that there's only one perfect being, and that's God. There's only one being who's going to be completely perfect all the way through. That's Hashem. No matter what we do, we're imperfect. So wrapped up in Rosh Hashanah, when we're shooting at the beginning of the year to walk a good upright line, we also know we need tshuva all the way through. So we can steer back this way, steer back that way. And Rosh Hashanah is part of the Aseret Yemei Tshuva. I'm stating the obvious, but a lot of people sometimes think it's the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But it is inclusive of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That has to be that way. Yeah, Deborah, please. Thank you, Deborah.
I just wanted to ask you to clarify this from the Chernobyl Rebbe.
Yeah.
Human form has different versions
Yeah.
of time. Person is basically meaning that the Yom Tovim in time are kind of, there's an analogy
To a human
to
being.
a human being.
Right.
And person, you said there was
Us.
Us.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The actual human being himself or herself. He didn't go into the one in space. Yeah. I did, yeah. Please.
As you talk, I don't know if I will be able to convey my message, but I hope I can. With the context of what happened with the storm, the head of the storm, the height of the storm, the shape of the storm like a shofar, it's the eyes, the vision, and then what it takes with it, and so it starts with the wind, and there is the rain, and there is how is the water can be. So he said the head of the wind, so it's the navigation. So the wind is navigating us to a certain direction, and then the rain that comes, and how they're, if they're together or not together. But then you're thinking about us, is what we take with us within it, and what we leave behind, and what we skip, and then the surge, when it's come back to us, is what we actually put in. So I just see that our whole life, how we invest in Hashem, and how we aware Hashem, and how we build ourselves up, it can navigate us to the right direction or the destruction direction.
Very nice. Thank you. You know, someone mentioned to me the other night at a banquet that we were talking about Hurricane Irma, and they were saying they were talking with some friends about, so what do you take? You have to get in your car, you have to leave, you got to go from Miami to Atlanta, which at least 1,000 from people did, and stayed in Atlanta last Shabbos. I got a text from our dear friend, Dr. Ron Berkman, that it was a 20-hour drive from Miami to Atlanta, like this, crawling to get there. So what do you take? Right, so a Jew, take yourself, take your family, take your tefillin. What else do you take? And he was saying that, you know, you can see something about the person from what they take and what they leave behind. So just, I'll say it because it was part of the text that Ron Berkman sent to me. He said he has himself and his family and his son and their family and our Sefer Torah. Because their family has a Sefer Torah. So that's so beautiful. Like, what do you take with you? You take the Sefer Torah. That's what he takes on his way out of Miami. Okay, we have a couple of concepts here. Now, there are three themes in the Rosh Hashanah davening, and they are Machios, Zichronos, and Shofros. Those are the three middle brachos of Shemona Esrei on Rosh Hashanah. Machios means Melech, Hashem is king, he rules the world. Zichronos can mean to remember, but even more so to bring to mind. A good word is also awareness. God doesn't forget. He's not remembering us, but he's, so to speak, putting us on the forefront of his mind. Yom HaZikaron. We also have a role in that. We have to put Hashem on our mind. So Yom HaZikaron goes both ways. He's thinking about us, we're thinking about him. What shofros? Like it sounds, blowing the shofar, shaking us up, do tshuva, thinking about all these things. Now, you may have noticed that in the Shemona Esrei, in Nusach Sfard, the silent Shemona Esrei, we blow the shofar 3 times. The first time is after the Malchios bracha, the second time is after the Zichronos bracha, and the third time is after the Shofros bracha. So here's my question. I understand why we blow the shofar for shofros, because that's what shofros is about. It's about the shofar, all kinds of psukim about shofar. But why do we blow the shofar for Malchios, and why do we blow the shofar for Zichronos? They don't seem to be related. It's only related to one of those 3 things, shofar. So here's the thought I'd like to share with you. I've mentioned before in Shul that if you look at the pattern of how we blow the shofar, Tekiah, Shvorim, Trua, Tekiah. Tekiah is a whole unbroken sound. Shvorim and Trua are both broken sounds. Shvorim is tu, 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 like that, and Trua is tu, 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 tu. They're meant to be people crying. And then you have a tekiah at the end. So you have a whole sound at the beginning, unbroken, a whole sound at the end, unbroken. In the middle, broken sounds. So one of the ideas there is that this charts the path of human growth. Where we stand right now, what we know about, so we're whole with that. But in order to get to the next place in life, we have to break out of where we are. That's Shavorim True in the middle. And then following that, we get to another whole place of rest. So Tekiah is the whole place we start. Shvurim Trua, we have to break it down, leave that place. Tekiah, another whole sound. That's the pattern of Tekiah Shofar all the way through. It's also the pattern for human growth. It's very fascinating to me that the same form or format is present on Pesach. On Pesach you have 3 matzahs, right? What do you do with the middle matzah? You break it. So what do you have? A whole one on top, a whole one on bottom, a broken one in the middle. That's very similar to Tekiah, Shvurim, Trua, Tekiah. Whole, broken, whole. So the difference is on Rosh Hashanah you listen to it, and on Pesach you eat it. Okay. You eat that experience on Pesach. On Rosh Hashanah you hear that experience. But what is the experience? The experience is saying this. This is what I currently know, Tekiah. I need to break out of that, to climb somewhere new, Shavorim, Trua. This is where I arrive, Tekiah. So we have to do that with Malchios, we have to do that with Zichronos, and we have to do that with Shofar. Because it's not just about the Shofar. This is the way people grow. So these 3 essential themes of Rosh Hashanah, they are meant for us to try and grasp them. Hashem is the Melech. God is the King of the universe. He runs everything. I have to grasp that on Rosh Hashanah. But hopefully a little different, a little better than I did last year. So Tekiah, that's how I go into it. Shvurim, I'm letting go of it. Tekiah, I got a new conception, a new comprehension of that idea. I do that for Hashem as Melech. Now Zichronos. God has us in mind. He's thinking about us. He is aware of us eternally. We're trying to be aware of Him. To be aware of God is one of the central foundations of Jewish life. Da lifnei mi ata omed, know before whom you stand. To be aware of Hashem. And how many times are we walking around over the course of the day and we forget that there is Hashem? It happens to us all the time. We get involved in the world. The Ramchal says we're terudim. We're occupied with the world. We forget about God. So Zichronos is about, this is my current level of awareness of Hashem. It's my Tekiah. Got to get rid of that. Got to break that down. Shavorim Trua. Tekiah, our new level of awareness. And then once again, for the actual shofaros, waking us up. So I believe that the sounds of the shofar, Tekiah, Shvarim, Trua, Tekiah, are relevant to each theme because they are about our relationship to that theme. Experiencing it, so to speak, dropping it, and experiencing that again. Okay, any comments on that? Any thoughts? Elka, please.
Just one thing you said about
Yeah.
the matzahs on Pesach.
Mhm.
So is it right that the first night of Rosh Hashanah is also the first night of Seder?
The first night of...
The day of the week.
I'm
like
trying
this
to
is
remember.
Yom,
I know what you're saying.
Ah.
I want to say yes. I think that's correct.
I think that's
That the first night of Rosh Hashanah will come out on the same day of week as the first night of Rosh Hashanah. I'm pretty sure that's correct. Yeah.
Right, so
Okay.
when you
Hmm?
mentioned...
I'm sorry?
The first night of
about-
Rosh Hashanah will be the same first.
Of Pesach.
Pesach.
Okay. I think that's correct.
I know,
Okay.
so when you mentioned that the format is the same, so that's what I thought of immediately. It's not, that's the format in time as well as in however you would
Very
say that.
Very good. That's a nice connection. So now we have to just verify that it's true. I'm thinking in my mind that Tisha B'Av and Pesach are the same
Right.
night of the week. That I remember. Can't remember. I really should just check it out before we go, so we don't have. Are you checking it out? You that's good. Thank you. Yeah, Shoshana,
I
please.
was thinking about the last Tekiah on Yom Kippur.
Uh-huh.
which is a trua.
Yeah.
Is
No,
that-
no, it's a tekiah.
Tekiah, right.
Yeah.
So it's the whole idea of us, is that mean you kind of come the full circle?
Yeah, I mean that's also about that. Those tekiahs at the end of Yom Kippur are about the closing of that time of year, and everything is going up like the sound of the shofar goes up.
So it's
Yeah.
sort of.
But it closes with a tekiah. Yeah.
It's like a way of it's like an expansiveness.
Yeah.
And connects. It's sort of, I think,
Yeah.
based on what you're saying, it's sort of like taking from Rosh Hashana and making a closure about what we've done.
Yeah.
And seeing it in the context.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you. I gotta get into. I'm feeling warm. Are you feeling warm? Anybody? I'm feeling very warm. Lenny, can you knock that down? Unfortunately, it's going to ruin the sound quality a little bit. But hey, I'm hot. Yeah, Leila Brown. Just one second. I got to just do one thing. Leila Brown, I want to make sure to hear your question.
I think the
I hope it's I forgot to make sure that it's charged.
Okay, you're on.
I had a thought. You were saying that if the tekiah, it's a solid flow,
Mhm.
so it could be seen as something that's linear, that just goes from point to point with no stopping.
Mhm.
And then we have the Shavarim and the Teruah, so they're broken up. So I'm seeing in my mind steps, or a ladder perhaps. You're taking these
Nice.
steps going up, and then when you reach the top, then you hit the Teruah again, and then you go back to the linear stage.
That's very nice. Shikaya. Judith, what did you find?
It's Friday night.
Is it the same night?
No.
It's not.
No.
Okay. So Rosh Hashanah, the first night of Rosh Hashanah is not the first night of Pesach. But I do know that the first night of Pesach and the first night of Tisha B'Av, that does follow the same, right? Okay, so we'll have to just think it was a nice idea.
Yom Kippur is the same
As
as Pesach.
Yom Kippur night is the same day of the week as Pesach. Well, it's Friday night, it's Shabbos, like you're saying, right? Okay. So we could probably work it out. We can fudge it a little bit, right? Yeah. I'm just going to go on a little bit further. Okay. So that's a view of Rosh Hashanah. Now we're going to go to Aseret Yemei Tshuva, which are, as we said, inclusive of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There are always 7 days, naturally, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And the Sforim HaKadoshim say that when we go through those 7 days of the week, that we're doing teshuvah for that day of the week for the entire previous year. So, for example, this year Rosh Hashanah is on Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday. So Thursday, Friday. So the next day, Shabbos, we're doing teshuvah for Shabbos for the entire previous year. Then Sunday, then Monday, then Tuesday, all the way to the end of the week. Always 7 days. What we do on that day helps us do tshuva for the entire previous year. And what is even said in addition to that is that it's teshuvah for that day of the week since the time of creation. So a very big opportunity in Aseret Yemei Tshuva to be misakein that day of the week all the way through history. We're coming right off of Rosh Hashanah, Hashem is Melech. Now there's a very fascinating halacha in the Aseret Yemei Tshuva. This is in Shulchan Aruch, Siman Tov Reish Gimel, and it talks about a person during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva should, in our language, up their game. Doesn't say that in the Shulchan Aruch. But however nicely we behave over the course of the year, we're supposed to do even better during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva. We've got to take things up a notch. And then, what's the example which is given in the halacha? In the Shulchan Aruch comes from the Torah based on the Yerushalmi. I'll read you the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. Af mi she'eno nizhar mipah shel kusim ba'aseres yimei tshuva sorich li zoher. A person who is not makpid on Pas Yisroel, I'll explain that, during the rest of the year, during the Aseres Yimei of Tshuva, they should be makpid. Right, so what does this mean? Pas Yisroel means bread, which is baked by a Jewish person. Pas Akum means bread that's baked by a non-Jewish person. Now we know that we have a restriction of Bishul Akum, Pas Akum. We're not allowed to eat important foods that are cooked by Gentiles. At a minimum, a Jew must at least light the fire. If you have a non-Jewish person working in your house who's cooking, you have to make sure that you light the fire for what they cook, for many foods. Not all foods, but many foods. Anything which is important. Now there's an exception to this. Halacha. The Chachamim say, even though we're not allowed to eat bread baked by a non-Jewish person, that means even though the ingredients are kosher. But when it comes to a professional baker, pas palter, the Chachamim say we're allowed to have that. Why? Because they understood it may not always be possible to get bread baked by a Jewish person over the course of history. And what might be available is bread baked by a non-Jewish bakery which has kosher ingredients. So the Chachamim said, we're allowed to eat that. Pas Yisroel is preferable, but we're allowed to eat pas palter, kosher bread baked by a non-Jewish professional bakery. Now, that's during the rest of the year. The Shulchan Aruch says on the Aseres Yimei Tshuva, everybody should be careful to eat pas Yisroel, bread baked by a Jew. You should be careful. There are exceptions to that. If you're traveling, you can't get pas Yisroel. Okay, you don't have to go without bread. But you should try it. In a community like ours, so it's not so hard. All right, so any bread from 7 Mile Market, now let's say from Seasons, right? Any bread that they have with the proper hashgachan under the star K or anything else, that's pas Yisroel. It comes from a star K bakery. But you could have a bread with a hashgacha, say an OU, for example, or another chaf K, which are fine hechsherim, but they would be putting a hechsher on bread that's baked by a non-Jewish bakery, with all the ingredients being kosher. And it's kosher. During the course of the year, you could eat it. During that Aseres Yimei Tshuva, you really shouldn't. Better to get bread baked by a Jewish bakery and by Jewish people. So that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. So the question that many people have on this is, why is this the example? Out of all of the things that we could be doing to do things a little better, why is this the one example that they give? There's so many areas where we could be a little more machmir. Why this? Just by the way, the Ramah says, so we shouldn't think it's only that, V'yesh l'chol adam l'chapes u'lefashvesh b'ma'asav v'lashuv mehem ba'aseres yimei tshuva. Every person should look into all of their actions on the Aseres Yimei Tshuva and do tshuva. So it's not just the bread. It's the whole deal. It's the whole picture. Now, many thoughts on this, but I just want to share one with you. Bread is the staple of life. Bread is the primary source of human eating, mealtime for all of history. But many other important foods, there's only one food that gets the bracha, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, that's bread. It's considered to be the most highest level of food. So, during that Aseres Yimei Tshuva, in our consumption of food, and not only that, but the highest level bracha of food, which is bread, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, we would like to make sure that the source of that is as pure as possible. So many halachos the Shulchan Aruch could have chosen here, but eating is one of the primary physical human functions. Bread is the highest order of food in terms of brachos. So eat pas Yisroel let the source of our nutrition during these 10 days, let it be Jewish. Let it be a Jewish source of nutrition. And so I like to take that concept and say, we should take a look at our behavior, a look at what we're doing, and we should ask ourselves this question, is it Jewish? Am I doing a Jewish thing right now? It's like the Ramah says, you know what? We have to look at everything we're doing, not just the bread, and try and improve ourselves. And the way I would like to frame that is with those terms. Is this emistica authentic Jewish behavior right now? And I think that provides a certain guidance for trying to do tshuva. I got angry. I spoke Lashon Hara. I took something that wasn't mine. So that's not Jewish behavior. That's Yetzer Hara behavior, right? Not Jewish behavior. We want to be authentically Jewish during this time of year. Now I want to share one more thought with you. And it's a thought that really occurred to me today as I was preparing for this year. And we're going to close on this thought and we'll get to some more of your questions. There is an idea on Hanukkah and on Purim that Hashem reveals himself even into the very lowest of places. So Hanukkah, it's the middle of winter, it's dark. We light our menorah in a fairly low place beneath 10 Tfachim because the light of the Shekhinah is seeping into the lowest places. It's going everywhere. Purim also, it's a physical celebration. There's a feast, there's eating, there's drinking. So the light of Purim goes even into those most physical places. Yom Kippur is not like that. Yom Kippur, of all the Yom Tovim, has the highest light. There's only one day which is holier than Yom Kippur. You know what day that is? Shabbos. Of all the Yom Tovim, Yom Kippur is the holiest one, and like the Moreh Naim says, it's the neshama of the year. Normally, when a person lifts themselves to a higher level spiritually, we become subject to a more precise deen. We're a little careful when we start taking steps upward in Ruchnius, because how worthy are we, to act in such holy ways? So, the higher a person goes, the magnifying glass gets a little stronger. And Hashem judges the tzaddikim like the breadth of a hair, the Chachamim say. Any small variation they could be judged for. So here, I think, lies an insight into the greatness of the day of Yom Kippur. That we're rising to the level of Malachim. So much so that in the Kriya Shema we can say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusa L'Olam V'Ed out loud, like an angel does. We don't do that during the year. We're dressed in white. We don't eat. We don't drink. We're like Malachim. So normally, if we're going to go up to the level of Malachim, we have to be a little bit afraid of Hashem's scrutiny. Who says you can stand so high? Who allows you to consider yourself an angel? You think you're a malach? Let's see. Right? Not on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, Hashem allows us to experience the highest levels of being a human being, and we are found to be completely clear of Averos, even under the magnifying glass. So as you go spiritually higher, the magnification is stronger. Normally we are frightened of that process, even though we have to embark on it. On Yom Kippur, we go up that spiritual ladder, and Hashem looks at the Jewish people, scrutinizes us like a sheep in front of its shepherd. He sees the depths of our hearts, and he said, Everything is clean and white. Lifnei Hashem titharu. That's the pasuk for Yom Kippur. Even standing right there before God, we are found to be clear and pure. So that's the greatness of Yom Kippur, that we're standing in a very high place, and Lifnei Hashem titharu. At the same time, when we stand in that high place, we have to stand there with humility. And if we don't stand there with humility, then we're in trouble. To say, thank you, Hashem, for giving us this day of the year where we are like Malachim, where we are as holy as angels. We're humbled to be in this place. We don't want to be proud or arrogant to be in that place. We want to be humble to be in that place. And we walk that very high mountaintop on Yom Kippur, and there in that high place, we have kapara. And I think that's why our averos drop away and we throw them off a cliff. They're not relevant to us anymore. We rose above them on Yom Kippur. Hanukkah and Purim is dealing with them where they are and bringing the light into those places. Yom Kippur, we're rising above our averos, and when we go that high, they're not there anymore. So we throw them off a cliff. Throw them to the Sitra Achra, where they belong. Where we walk up there on Yom Kippur, there's no averos anymore. That is Lifnei Hashem Titharu. As Rosh Hashem, we should all be Zochet to great things. This Elul, Rosh Hashana, Aseres Tshuva, and Yom Kippur. Were there a few more questions out in the booth there? In the audience? Anybody have more questions? I did, please. Yeah.
I just met an amazing woman, and I think it's a nice thing for each individual to take it into consideration. She bought me a page that gives different stages that every day we need to think about, to do this one mitzvah a day. And one thing's to appreciate even things that it is not good happening to us, but appreciate where it takes us.
Mm-hmm.
And she bought a few other things. I don't remember all the details. Daniela Storch have all the information. But it's interesting because if we have a set mind to do good and to understand that even something is not good happening in our life, have a reason to take us to some place and part of our growth, it's part of our developing of clearing ourselves, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, very much so. Okay, get Kibben, sure everybody. A kasiva v'chasima tova. Great to see you all.